Hi friends, we're looking at this section which is lease modifications under the new lease accounting standard. Friends, in the earlier sections we have talked about that if there is a reduction in the scope of lease, then how you shall be accounting for that, and also if there is a increase in the scope of lease, how you should be accounting for that as well, right? This lecture we want to do both under a particular circumstance and see to it how does lease modification, which is combining both an increase in the scope as well as the reduction in scope, is taken care of. Okay, we are given some scenarios and you would observe that there are a lot of calculations in front of us, and these are very straightforward calculations, so I'll be also explaining these as a part of the discussion. But let's have a look at it. What exactly was there and what got changed. So that is something that we want to talk about. It says that the original lease term is 10 years. The leased space is 2000 square meter, for example. Annual lease rentals which are paid in arrears are $100,000 and incremental borrowing rate is 6%. And there is a lease modification at the start of year 6. There is an additional space of 1500 square meter with a revised annual rental of $150,000. But it is also resulting into a reduced lease term, which is for up to 8 years. Like, so originally it was for 10 years, it's going up to 8 years, which means that at this point in time, when you look at the start of year 6, which is 5 more years, it is only 3 more years. So there is a reduction in scope here, but there is an additional space, which means there is an addition in the scope as well. But also importantly, the interest rate is at this point in time is 7%, right? We'll come to the modification part in some time. That's where our accounting would begin, of course, in terms of the modification aspect. But if I look at the original spacing, like original terms here, it says the lease term is 10 years. Space is not important for me for some calculations. But it says rental is in arrears of $100,000 with an incremental borrowing rate of 6%. I know in my leasing, I need to calculate my lease liability first, and on the basis of that, my right of use asset is calculated as well. Okay, so when I say I'm looking at my amounts, very simply put, I'm looking at there are annual rentals in arrears, which is like at the end of the year, $100,000, and well, for my first year's present value, I can simply say divided by 1.06 to the power 1, it will give me some value, and I keep on doing it for, let's say, year 1, year 2, up to year 10, right? And that's the same calculation which is given here, right? If you observe it, it says original lease liability as well as the right of use asset. I'm given the sequencing of year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The amounts are $100,000 at the end of the year 1, which means the present value would be calculated by discounting it at 6%. I'm just taking a rounded number, which gives me the total amount as 735,900. So this is my initial lease liability as well as the right of use asset. So the first entry that I would be doing when I recognize my initial lease liability and ROU, I'm saying that on day 1, my accounting is like this: debit right of use asset and credit lease liability amounting to 735,900. Right? Now at this point in time, again, we know that if this goes just like this, my schedule of lease is also taken care of. In terms of my lease liability would become 0, and my right of use asset would be depreciated over the 10 years, assuming that's the life of the asset as well. So that is where you start looking at, this is getting depreciated and this is getting amortized with interest cost being added and then reduced by, you know, the amount of the payment that I'm making every year through the lease rental that I'm receiving or I'm paying as a lessee, for example, right? So if this goes for 10 years, everything becomes 0, but we are given now at the start of year 6, there is an additional space and there's a reduced lease term. Okay, so we need to accommodate that. For this, very importantly, we need to know what is the value of lease liability on the date of modification and what is the value of your right of use asset on the same date. Okay, now for right of use asset, it's fairly straightforward. All I'm saying is, if this is my original asset, right, and the life of the asset is 10 years, which means it's getting depreciated over 10 years, at the end of year 5, so start of the year 6 is also end of year 5, my asset would be only half of the value. Okay, and that is what is being calculated, that my right of use asset after 5 years would be 735,900 divided by 2, which is 367,950. So I'm simply looking at it that end of year 5, I have my right of use assets value as 367,950, right? Likewise, I can easily calculate, identify the value of my lease liability. Now this is assessed, for example, by using the original value of 735,900. Am I paying anything right away? The answer is no. I'm only paying my first installment of rental after 1 year of time, which means on this amount there would be an interest cost at 6% charged, and then the payment comes in, and then the closing balance would come. This closing balance becomes, of course, the opening balance in the next year, and I keep on doing it up to year 5 to arrive at my lease liability at the end of year 5, which is given as, or which is measured at 421,090. Okay, right? Now this is what is the first point that we have come to, right? We calculated the initial value of right of use asset, which was nothing else but the lease liability, and then at the end of year 5, when the modification is happening, we are looking at the carrying value of my lease liability, which is 421,090, and the carrying value of my right of use asset, which is 367,950. At this point in time, I firstly look at what is my reduction in the scope. Okay, because that is where I would want to compare it. What is my incremental after that? The reduction in scope says that the lease is modified to change my original term of 10 years to 8 years. That means my revised ROU shall be taken for 3 years instead of the 5 years remaining. Okay, I should calculate this for 3 years and not for 5 years, right? That's the first step I'm supposed to do. That is something which is going to be the new value of my right of use asset, resulting into the difference of the two, resulting into, of course, reduction in my right of use asset. So let's calculate this. This comes at, I'm using a calculator out of my phone, and I'm able to calculate it like this, which is 367,950 into 3 divided by 5. That gives me the value as 220,770, right? Now this also tells me the reduction that amounts to the difference between the two. So I can simply calculate like this. This amount again multiplied by 5 gives me, alright, so let me just do one thing. 367,950. Let me calculate that. 367,950 into 2 by 5 is my differential, which is 147,180. The reduction is 147,180, right? This should be straightforward. Importantly, on the lease liability, what you need to understand is, this is what is my value of the carrying value of the lease liability as on this date. I'm only supposed to pay, with the reduction in the lease term, I'm only supposed to pay for next 3 years, right? What does it mean? If I'm looking at that kind of reduction, the present value of those amounts shall be calculated for 3 years and not for 5 years anymore. Okay, so when you look at it, essentially I'm trying to say my revised lease liability shall be 100,000 divided by 1.06 to the power 1, 100,000 divided by 1.06 to the power 2, 100,000 divided by 1.06 to the power 3, right? And I can use simply these sums together. That is something which I originally did for my lease liability measurement any case, right? These 3 sums come out at, so I'm just going to use this spacing here. My revised lease liability comes to sum total of all these numbers, which is 300, and this is like 9 plus 8 is 7, and I have 10 and 16 is 26. So I have 267,300, right? Now what is happening is, there is also a reduction in my lease liability to the extent of 421,090 minus 267, 421,090 minus 267,300, which is 153,790. All right. So I think I can now use this space which we have done the calculations on, and I'm saying that, well, there is a reduction in my lease asset, the ROU basically, and there is a reduction also in my lease liability. Any difference between the two simply is taken to the income statement. So what I was saying is, this reduction in lease liability of 153,790, it means debit lease liability 153,790, credit ROU 147,180. Put simply, my reduction in asset is less than my reduction in liability. It simply means the difference goes to my income statement. So the difference between the two is nothing else but 10 here, and I'm looking at 6, and this gives me 6610. So this is my income on the date of modification, right? Now what I was saying here is, my asset is purely on the reduction part of it. So far my asset is valued at 220,770. My liability is valued at 267,300. Okay, but now comes an additional space, okay, which is, instead of only using the 2000 square meter, I'm using this, and my revised annual rentals have gone to $150,000. So where I was calculating this liability 267,300 on the basis of 100,000 per year, my revised liability has to be calculated at $150,000. Importantly to understand, it is coming at a revised interest rate which is at 7%, which means that my revised liability shall be measured at 393,600. Okay, now importantly, while we talked about reduction here, basis the revised liability calculation at original term, which is 267,300, my further revised lease liability comes at 393,600, which means that my liability has to be up So increase in lease liability will arise here to the extent of 393600 and differentiated by as a minus by or subtracted by 2673200, which gives me a figure of 300 here, and I have 600 here, and I have 200 here, and one further. It gives me 126300. Basically what I'm trying to say now is that this is the addition to the lease liability, because my scope of the lease has changed, it has increased, and with respect to these incremental cash flows or the new cash flows, the total change in my lease liability is 126030 positive. So what do? I simply take this all to my right of use asset and I say debit ROU 126300 and credit, of course, lease liability of 126300. Right? So all you need to understand here, or you need to observe here, is that when you look at both modifications coming out of let's say a reduction in the scope as well as an increase in the scope, see to it that you are able to remeasure your lease liabilities and assets at the same time, at the time of modification, and any difference between the two shall be taken to the income statement, and after that any further enhancement to the scope shall be taken as a increase in the lease liability as we calculated here, and the corresponding impact of course goes to the value of right of use asset. Okay, thank you very much. Bye bye.